Fishing. I went fishing with my neighbor yesterday. Tried out my fly rod. I bought a new fly rod. Good adventure. Anybody like to fly fish? I understand Ron Butts likes to fly fish. He's not here today. But anybody like fly fish? Anybody tried it? Man, I got so many knots in my stuff, it was terrible. But eventually, after I cut them all off, it worked okay. But it was really interesting. The thing that I notice is that it's hard to be attentive when you're using a fly rod, because when you're using a bobber, you just look for the thing to go down. But with a fly rod, you're feeling how the fish decides to take the bait or not. Very challenging. The promise today is that the Lord is attentive to us. He has promised that He will be attentive to us. And so if there's nothing that you remember today, remember that God is watching and listening and interested in us far more than we could ever imagine. Because the tempter whispers in our ear that he's not watching, he doesn't care, he's too critical, you shouldn't trust him, you should invite him to help you. And Peter is encouraging us to do just that. If you have your Bible, if you'll open back up to 1 Peter chapter 3 this time. So the verse we're looking at today is from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12. So I think most of you probably have a card like this or received one, or maybe you have a paper that looks like this. This is, there are one more Summer Promise series coming up, and so you'll be able to follow along today. Let's read this promise together. This is from 1 Peter 3:12. Let's read that card together. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, we always say, well, let's read that in some other versions. So does somebody have a different version, perhaps? Yes. So if you could read it in a different version and read it loudly. He is? He's quoting Psalm 34, 15 to 16. Yep, so read that one. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to blot out their name from the earth. Yes. So Peter, in this section, is pulling an Old Testament from Psalm 34, 15 to 16. So he is including that as something that Peter does, frequently uses quotes and clips. Anybody else have a different version? King James, we'll take that one. We don't usually read that too much, but some folks do. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. So that uses open instead of attentive. Same kind of picture. They're open toward, his eyes are open, his ears are open or attentive. Anyone else? One more version? Somebody got a fancy scrolling tablet that can poke? Yes, sir. Sure, yep.
The eyes of the Lord watch over those who do right, and his ears are open to their prayers. But the Lord turns his face against those who do evil.
Gotcha. Now, does that translate it prayers, or is it prayer?
Prayers.
That one says prayers. Because some of the versions will say prayer, and some will say prayers. It's actually a singular noun, but, you know, when they're translating, they're trying to capture the flow of the ideas. Very helpful. Now, what I'd like us to do is to look at 1 Peter 3, verses 8 through 12. Now, I have an exercise for you to do, and this is a little uncomfortable. Okay, so I acknowledge it's a little uncomfortable. But if you would find someone else, you don't have to know them, it's probably best you don't know them, so find somebody else in church here you don't know, and sit next to them And I want you to read that section, verses 8 down through 12. And I'd just like you to share your opinion about what seems easy from those verses and what seems hard from those verses. So, I'm not asking you to interpret it theologically. I just am interested in, what do you find easy? What do you think seems easy? And what do you think seems difficult? Can we do that? It's a bit of an experiment. And so just find someone that you don't know, introduce yourself to them. So you guys need to split up. Marcia, you need to split up. Oh, no, she's by herself. So go find somebody you don't know, read the verses, and just share what is your opinion about what seems easy to you and what seems difficult. You ready? We don't have a lot of time. So get moving. And if you're watching online, if you want to leave a comment in the YouTube videos underneath, leave a comment there about what from that text seems easy to you or what seems difficult. And if you want to call me, my cell phone number is 919-606-3285. It's probably printed on the church website, so you can find it there. 919-606-3285. So if the other person haven't had a chance to talk yet, you should give someone else a chance to talk. Okay, so you should be wrapping up pretty soon because this is not a long exercise. This is just a quick observation. What seems easy? What seems difficult? And so as you wrap up, you can head back to your seat. One of the things we always do at the Summer's Promise text is we're always asking the question, okay, this is what the verse is, but what did it mean to the original participants? We're always trying to connect it to what did it mean to the people who originally got it. And as Peter wrote, if you read other parts of 1 Peter, one of the things you notice is he wrote to people that were under persecution. He wrote to people that were having problems. He wrote to people, and that's the reason why in chapter 1 it talks about how you need to not think about all your trials. You need to think about how there's a place in heaven prepared for you, and God is keeping that for you. Because even though you've got people who are attacking you, people who are making your life miserable, people who are being unkind to you because you're a follower of Jesus, don't be caught up in how that is hard. Keep your eyes on the fact that Jesus has prepared a place for you. Not only did he come and did he die and did he rise again, And Peter saw him. And like we had this conversation about this. Like, I know this is real, so don't lose sight of the fact that he's got something for you. And he's keeping it for you. Because then when we get down into chapter 3 and we read those verses where it says suffering for doing good, finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. He's writing into the community of faith. Because sometimes when things are going wrong on the outside, it gets kind of ugly on the inside, you know? You know, sometimes we bring the hassles of life into church and then we are critical of one another. And sometimes we're mean-spirited. We shouldn't be. But sometimes instead of being more like Jesus, we're sometimes a little rough on each other. So he says, finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic. Love as brothers. Be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. You were called to be a blessing. You were called to be blessed. You were called to be in a relationship with a God in heaven who's your Abba Father and loves you intensely and has redefined what's valuable. You were called so that you may inherit a blessing, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. And then he continues, who's going to harm you if you're doing good? Live for God. Talks about suffering there at the end of chapter 4, and he challenges the men in the fellowship. As we read down through there, some of the things that we recognize is that some of the things that he expected are things that require God's help. You know, when someone is unkind to us, whether it's somebody in the family of God or outside the family of God, our first response is always to preserve our sense of worth and dignity. And frequently that means we have to lash out or express our feelings. We proverbially call that giving them a piece of our mind. Or if you are more in the vernacular, telling them off, okay? And so he presents this idea of, instead of telling them off, what happens if you bless them? I know that sounds weird, okay, in our culture, like that someone would be unkind to you and you would find a way to bless them. But Jesus practiced that as he walked and talked with people. When the Pharisees were unkind to him, did Jesus tell them off because he was angry at them? No. Now, did he give them a piece of his mind because they were doing the wrong thing? Yes. So there is a place for honesty in relationships. But Jesus was never about just improving his sense of worth because he got it off his chest. He was always about the other's good. And it sure seems in this text that Peter is writing because he wants the kingdom, fellowship, the family, to experience the good that they've had eternally in the now, not just in the future. So he writes, and as he does, he's consistent with what Paul said in Romans, where in Romans 12, Paul wrote, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is in the eyes that is right in the eyes of everyone. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, because God will handle that." In verse 10, Peter writes, what did he say? Whoever. So this is kind of an open-ended blanket statement. Anybody. You, me, your neighbors, anybody that's part of the kingdom family is invited. Whoever, and it's probably wider than that. Whoever loves living and wants to see good days. Anybody not like to have a good life? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and most people I talk to, they want to have a better life. Even if your life is terrible, you wish it was a little better, right? I mean, who couldn't handle a few more days at the beach? Okay, a few more days in the mountains, you can handle that. You know, a few more days at the lake, you know, a few more days where you don't have to go into that workplace. Whoever, now he's not saying whoever does this will get free vacation, okay? He's not saying that. But whoever loves living and wants to see good days should live in a certain way. Not any old way, but in a certain way. How does he say to live? What he doesn't say is he doesn't say live for what makes you happy today. He doesn't say live for all the thrills that alcohol or drugs or sex or shopping or work will give you. And all those things give you times of joy and contentment. All those things do, and they have their role. But he says, whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. See, all those things are things that I think are hard for us to do as humans, because our tendency is to drift toward the easy and the pleasurable and the rewarding in the moment. But he's inviting us to think about a long-range play where God, as our Father, wants to give us joy and happiness because he meets our needs in ways that are more fulfilling than all the things we tend to drift toward. And he says, whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil. See, the word evil there is to have a place of corruption in us. Last week we sold peaches at the produce truck, and I took them home, and on Tuesday I cut into them, and I was disappointed, fairly disappointed, because when I cut into them, they were mushy. There's nothing like cutting into a peach that you have waited to ripen and finding that instead of it being juicy and sweet, it's kind of bland and pasty. And I cut those 4 because I was hoping that at least one of the 4 would be good. And none of the 4 were good. In fact, they were bad enough that if you bought peaches last week and you got them home and they were mushy, you should take some today for free. Okay? I was disappointed. And if anybody would have come to me at the produce truck and said, I was disappointed with those peaches last week, I would have said, please, here, take some for free. I was disappointed too. And I don't know if I just waited too long, because when I got home later on Thursday, Friday, we had 2 sitting on the edge of the counter, and they were nice and soft. You know, that soft where it's supposed to be juicy inside. And I cut them things, and they were brown inside, and they were terrible. He's talking about how evil inside of us makes our insides terrible. And if our insides are terrible, it's going to slip out. Like, it's going to slip out our mouth. It's not like we're going to think we're going to be mean or we're going to be ugly to people, but it's going to be just the thing that comes out of us, especially when something happens. And so he's saying, you must keep your tongue from evil, and the secret to keeping your tongue from evil and your lips from deceitful speech is to have different be what is inside. By meditating on what Jesus did to care for the inside pieces that don't work so good. One of the things that Jesus talked about with the woman at the well is that you should come and drink of the water that I have to give you, because if you drink the water I have, you'll not thirst again. And I have wanted that a lot this week. These are 6 commands, believe it or not. These aren't like options, like, if you want to, so what, good. No. He's saying, you do this. Keep your tongue from evil. You stop your tongue from wagging when you want to give somebody a piece of your mind and it's not for Jesus. Stop it. Now, in order to do that, you need the Holy Spirit to strengthen you so that you are exhibiting his self-control. He must keep his lips from deceitful speech. Sometimes people talk, and you know they're spinning a line because they want you to do something. They don't really care about you. They just care about their agenda. So they're spinning about how it's all about you, and inside you're going, I know that's deceitful speech. We're not supposed to be like that. So we keep our tongue from evil, keep our lips from deceitful speech, spinning the yarn so we get what we want. Verse 11, he must turn from that thing inside of him that is wrong and do good. Do what is right. He must seek peace and pursue it. Peace there means, if you've ever had a puzzle and you've gotten to the end and discovered that you missed a piece, how did you feel? You felt like there was no peace in that piece. You know, you wanted the peace so you could have peace. And if you didn't have the peace, there was going to be no peace. You're looking all around the house. Did it fall on the floor? Did the kids take it? Did the dog eat it? Where did that peace go? He's saying that you must seek peace, seek the piece of the puzzle that fits together. It's about wholeness. Seek wholeness and pursue it. That's to go after it as if it's important. Not being distracted by other things, but chasing what has highest value eternally. And the reason you should do this, and here is the crux of it, because anytime you see for or because, that's always signaling a transition. He's saying, be this way as believers, part of the kingdom family, be this way because, here's the reason, because the eyes of the Lord are watching, and his ears are listening. He's watching and listening. Have you ever been with someone where they were so tuned in to everything else that you knew they didn't listen to you? How did that make you feel? What did that create in you that you wanted to do? Now, you might not have done it, but I mean, there was a piece of you that wanted to slap them. You wanted to say, "Hey, over here, dummy." You wanted to get up and leave. You know, you're just like, well, why should I waste my time talking to you? But have you ever had anybody look you in the eye and listen with every piece of their body, where what you had to say was the most important thing ever, and like they're just waiting on the next word to come out of your mouth because what you're saying is the most important thing in all the world? Like there's a sense of hopefulness that comes when somebody looks and is interested in you, and that's the picture that Peter is saying, I know Jesus. I have spent time with him. He looked into me when I betrayed him 3 times, and the cock crowed, and my heart broke, and he found me. And we walked on the edge of the beach, and I talked, and he looked at me with eyes of love, and he listened to me attentively as if I was the only person in the world. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. That word righteous there means sincerity. Sincerity means being true all the way through. It's the same word that was in our previous verse, Psalm 84, where it says, "For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows honor and favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless." Sincere, true all the way through. So there's some different way that God looks at people who are following Jesus. And he's attentive, he's hearing, and he's seeing. But there's always the contrast. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. If we have evil in our heart and we treasure it, if we have evil in our life and we let it remain, if we aren't willing to give our life to him, and we hold on to the things that are destroying us, he will, in essence, kind of turn his face away, that hopefully we would learn, and that in learning that we would come toward him and find that he is gracious and loving and merciful and kind. That his ways are not destructive and his desires for us are beautiful. and that He wants to give us a hope and a future, and He wants to give us joy and peace and patience and kindness. He wants to fill us with His love, a love that even He showed when people put nails in His hands and held Him on a cross until He died. He said, "Forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing. They're lost, and they don't know what they're doing." And when we discover that His face is for us, it changes what it means to abide, to rest in Him, because He wants us to be with Him. Anybody have a chance to practice abiding this week? It's hard to abide. But I will tell you, if you don't cultivate a habit of abiding, your spiritual life will always remain small, and your faith will always feel dull and empty. It's really that easy. If you practice abiding in the vine, in Jesus, you practice abiding in the Scriptures and reading and meditate on the Scriptures and thinking about who Jesus is and what He's given us and how He's called us to live, He will expand your life so that your meaning and your hope will go from someplace other than what you do into who you're called to be as His child. But that only comes by finding times to abide. Everything that Peter said in here is all contingent on us abiding. It is the consummate call that He pays attention to us. But He invites us that we would come and abide. So that, if you're busy and running all the time, how does anybody listen to you? Really? If you're always running, who has a chance to actually sit down and listen to you? You don't even have a chance to listen to you. There's no room to listen. Abiding. Now, I started off with a fishing illustration, and I'm going to end with a fishing illustration. My neighbor went fishing, and that's where I tried out my fly rod, and I caught lots of little fish. It was very fun. And he was fishing with a bobber, and he threw it out, and he had a nice, he doesn't catch very many fish, and I was like, well, okay, well, come and sit. I was kind of bored, and so I came, and I sat down next to him, and he's fishing, and he has this little bobber about yay big, and then he had underneath the bobber, he had a lead weight that was the size of the tip of my pinky. And then he had about 6 inches, and he had a hook that was connected with a snap swivel. And then he had his bait on the bottom of that. He'd throw that thing out, and I would see that bobber kind of going like this in the water. You know, when a bobber goes like this, that's a signal. That's like, hey, pull on me because I can catch a fish. And I said, it doesn't look like that's working very good. Could we do something different? He's like, well, what will we do? And I said, well, when it just starts to move, you should pull it. It's like, well, it hasn't gone under yet. I said, oh, I know. I said, well, can we bring your bobber in? Can I redo that for you? And he says, yeah. And so I took the weight off, took the bobber off, put the hook right on the line so it was light and easy underneath. He was using those little fluorescent orange shad baits that you buy in little packs that are the sales gimmicks for the fish companies. And they do work because he caught fish later. But he stuck 2 of them on, and so we redid it where it was just the bobber down to a little hook, and I fixed the bobber like it's supposed to work, because you're supposed to put the little button so that it turns over, and then when the fish hits the bobber, it spins the button up so you can see it. I think they build it for kids, but it works good for adults too. And we took all the weight off, and he threw that thing out, and the bobber landed, and it spun red side up like it's supposed to. And when the fish hit it, it flipped over like it's supposed to. And he goes, boop, and he caught a fish like, boom. And I thought he was going to fall in the lake. He was so excited. He is like giggly happy. Like, I can't believe, like, that's the reason. He looked at me, that's the reason I haven't been catching fish? I was like, oh, I can't speak for all the other times you've gone out. But I can guarantee you that if you hook the bobber differently, that you'll see the fish hit, and you don't wait for the bobber to disappear. You just wait for it to spin, and as soon as it spins, you got to tug it, because as soon as you tug it, you'll set the hook. He's like, that's what I got to do? Now, I say all that for this reason. I think that we are building our lives like he built his bobber. That we are carrying all kinds of weights, and we are throwing it out, and it's going like this, and we're hoping to catch something big by running frantically 24/7. Where we are not interested in turning from evil and turning toward good. We're not interested in listening to what Jesus says about how our mouth should be controlled by his Spirit. We don't have any interest in that. We want to do what we want to do, and we want to say what we want to say. And we're like throwing our bobbers out with all this weight, and we're tired, but we don't know what to do different. We just keep throwing it out again. We're just hoping it'll work this time. And it doesn't. We pull it back in, we throw it out again. We find a new job, we find a new partner, we find a new hobby, we find a new thing of choice. It doesn't work. And Jesus is inviting us to let him redo our fishing hook. He's inviting us to let him change the way the bobber sits. Let him get rid of the weight. Let him put a thing on there that makes us contagious. And then he says, well, let's throw that in a different place. Because I think that there's something out there that you can catch in your life that is beautiful for you. And I will be with you, and I will coach you as you go. And if you'll just try it my way, I'll fill you with joy and delight that you have not seen in 5 years. I will change the trajectory of the life that you're trying to figure out. And I'll put you on a path that will not be easy, but will be filling, that will not be simple, but will be transforming. I have the ability. I know how to fish. I know how to teach you how to live your best life. That is what Peter is trying to get across to the followers that he's writing to. He's saying, don't get wrapped up in bickering about stuff that isn't working. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't be mean-spirited to each other because they don't fill all your needs. They were never meant to fill all your needs anyway. They were meant to sharpen you by being a little bit so that you look to God as your help and deliverer. Okay? So don't look at other people like they're supposed to be like the magic sauce that makes your hot dog work, okay? Look at them like they're part of the journey. But look at Abba Father, because Abba Father, he loves you more than you love yourself. And he cares about you and your family more than you ever could. And he invites us to turn from evil and pursue good, to turn from wickedness and do good. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, those who are sincere, true all the way through. That's not to say that we're perfect, but to say that all the way through we're wanting to be more like Jesus and less like my old self. Because I didn't really like my old self anyway. His eyes are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. What is it that you need God to do in your life this week? Do you need him to give you hope in a hopeless situation? What would you say if he was sitting right next to you, listening with his ears and his eyes on you? What would you wish he would say to you about your challenge? As we close in prayer, let's just listen. As the worship team comes and we sing this last song, listen for what it is that Jesus wants to say to you about the thing that you find most challenging in your life. We'll just pause and we'll pray. Lord, our lives have lots of things that are hard. Kids make it hard, people make it hard, jobs make it hard, lack of money makes it hard. How things in our past come into our present make it hard. Sometimes just how hard we are on ourselves makes it hard. I think today that you would say, I know it's hard, and I love you anyway. I think he would say, let's go get in the boat together. I can take care of that storm you're afraid of. Trust me and rest. I think he would say, I've made bread for 5,000 people. I can take care of what you think you need. Trust me. Believe that I'm good. Don't listen to the devil who whispers that I'm not. What does the Spirit of God say to you about your thing? Marsha's going to play a little bit before they sing, and we'll just pause, and then the worship team will sing, and then when they start singing, we'll stand up and sing together. Come and pray. We'll pray with you. If you're going to pray by yourself, go to one of the altars. He's listening to you. He wants you to know He's listening. He sees you. He loves you.